Welcome to this podcast in a series developed by the Nebraska Juvenile Justice Association. Njja is a 501c3 not-for-profit public benefit association. The mission of Njja is to improve services to youth in the juvenile justice system by serving as a resource for collaboration, leadership development, and education for juvenile justice system professionals and interested stakeholders. Our efforts are greatly enhanced with the generous support of the Sherwood Foundation. Please visit our website at njja.org to see a list of upcoming podcasts, as well as the opportunity to revisit those podcasts previously recorded. We welcome your thoughts as to potential podcast topics and interest. Welcome to the Juvenile Justice in Nebraska podcast, produced by the Nebraska Juvenile Justice Association.
All right, here we are, episode 17 of the Nebraska Juvenile Justice Association podcast. I'm your host, Rico Zavala, joined by the very talented Tammy, who serves as our executive director of Njja. So last week we had on Joe Beckman, who's going to be kicking off our conference in May. Looking forward to that. He was a great podcast host, or great podcast guest, and we can't wait to get into the conference. Today's guest will be closing the conference out in style. He has over 2 decades of experience in the court administration and probation service arena, and he currently serves as a court administrator for the Cobb County Juvenile Court near Atlanta, Georgia. Our guest today is none other than Adolphus Graves. Adolphus, how are you?
Absolutely. Doing well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. We're looking forward to getting you to Nebraska. I've heard a lot of great things about you. And that Friday slot is an important slot to send the staff home with the lasting message of go home and do well. So we're looking forward to that. Adolphus, before we get started, why don't you just kind of update or let people know who are listening kind of who you are, what you do, what your passion points are, and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So again, thank you so much for having me. I'm Adolphus Graves, and I currently serve as the court administrator for Cobb County Juvenile Court, just to the northwest of the city of Atlanta, and also the home of the world champion Atlanta Braves, as Truist Park is right down the street from us. Also I serve on Georgia's SAG as well. I remember the SAG I have been for probably about 8 years, and then also had the benefit and the fortunate opportunity to serve on the last Federal Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice as well, representing Georgia SAG in that capacity. I've done a lot of work in the space of just looking to improve efficiency and effectiveness in juvenile justice systems as a whole, but then also identifying key touch points within the system in which we can kind of change some of our procedural operations to really enhance long-term outcomes for the children and families that we serve, as opposed to just really focusing on, as some systems do, compliance with conditions and court order conditions, right? That really just lead to short-term anecdotal successes, but don't really improve community safety in the long run. So I've been fortunate to work with a number of national groups and associations just to help support the work. Of course, to learn from all of those as well about a lot of the work going on in states and jurisdictions, and just believe I bring to the table, hopefully, a skill set that can really help to empower practical change in jurisdictions that go beyond just policy changes, and really focusing on some of that work that enhances the intent of legislative updates and reform initiatives that really gets down to the local level, and really helping staff and employees really try to figure out how to actualize some of the intent of legislative updates and or reform initiatives. So just happy to be a proud public servant, and just looking for any way possible to help maximize community safety as it relates to juvenile justice, even in instances where that means providing non-traditional recommendations of how we do our work that have been rooted in science and evidence of being effective, and trying to hopefully encourage folks to be confident in making some of the changes that again can lead to some of these long-term outcomes for community safety.
Well, if anything, you're going to bring a ton of experience to the conference. We like I said, we're looking forward to it. We can't wait. Adolphus, somebody told me that there might be a big event happening in Georgia this week.
What would that be? We have a lot of big events here in Georgia. So
the Masters.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to that. And yes, that is one of the biggest. But I was wondering if you were also talking about one of our great local festivals that we have as we're really excited to open up the spring season in the way that we haven't been able to for a couple of years now. But absolutely, we're looking forward to the Masters and hopefully we'll see the return of some participants that we didn't expect to be there as well.
I hope so. So Adolphus, tell me, so have you done much work? Have you worked at all with the Robert F. Kennedy Resource for Juvenile Justice?
Yes. So I've done some work with the RFK folks. In my previous position, I formerly was the director of probation services for Fulton County Juvenile Court, which is the city of Atlanta and the included municipalities there. And that is actually where I met John Toole and his team and did some work in that jurisdiction around the dually involved youth. We really were able to dig deep there through the leadership of one of our judges, rest in peace to Judge Willie Lovett, and really working in depth with our local Department of Family and Children's Services and the state partners to develop a system of early identification of dually involved youth and trying to identify ways to address their unique needs there in that population, even if, for example, we were able to divert or reroute some of those delinquency cases, still really being able to focus on the needs of those children to, again, identify ways to include prevention and long-term strategies and working with our Department of Family Children's Services and local jurisdiction in a different way. Also, we participated in the probation system review here in my current jurisdiction in Cobb County. Actually, prior to my arrival here, they had participated in about an 18-month process of the PSR review and came to the table with an extraordinary about 72, 75-page document of a real comprehensive analysis of our probation operations as a whole. So we've been able to take that and actually kind of run with it beyond just probation and really looking at our front end and trying to change our processes in the space of intake and really trying to come up with either alternative processing and or the use of a risk and needs instrument that we did not have in place before. So we've purchased one in the last 2 years and really have been focusing on the training for staff, again, to make sure that we're not just applying the risk and needs instrument on our procedures and hoping that that's going to change and lead to the outcomes we're looking for, but really looking into ways to, again, sustain the intent of the application of a risk and needs assessment by supporting staff in their training across the board. So, I've been very fortunate to work with the folks at RFK for a few years now. Absolutely.
Yep. Our RFK is something that is known to me. Our Nebraska is broken out by judicial districts. Judicial Districts 3J, which is here in Lincoln, actually work with the RFK folks to do the very similar work that you're talking about. I had the opportunity to meet with John, who is a phenomenal man, phenomenal guy, and a wealth of knowledge. I had the opportunity to tour him around our crisis stabilization shelter here that we run at Cedars here in Lincoln. So, what a phenomenal resource they are and what they can bring to the table when we talk about juvenile justice reform.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So talk to us a little bit about kind of what you're going to be bringing to the table for the conference. What don't give away too much, Adolphus, because we want to keep some cliffhangers here. But what can people expect from you?
Absolutely. So again, not giving away too much. I hope to bring to the table an engaging discussion and dialogue around racial and ethnic disparities within our system and how, if we ignore the issue of racial and ethnic disparities, that we actually increase and jeopardize the ability to maintain public safety. So I want to really just again engage in a conversation that we hope will really meet the needs of employees at multiple levels. So whether that be directors, administrators that are present, and or mid-level managers and supervisors, and also line staff. Hopefully a way to really invite all these tiers and levels of practitioners and folks that are in the work in a discussion that will empower them to really take an in-depth look at racial ethnic disparities and how at different points in the system, identifying or missing opportunities to really engage in a different way actually leads to really just a process that does not, again, sustain with those long-term outcomes that we all hope to achieve and really meet up to and live up to the standard of a juvenile justice system being a rehabilitative system for the purpose of maximizing community safety. So we're going to do a little bit of everything, a little Q&A. We're going to do a couple of breakouts where we'll have folks engage in some seat work. And again, we want to make sure that we leave participants with something that will provide a template or a roadmap for how to just engage in the conversation locally, and or whether that be in their districts and or their jurisdictions independently, whether that be local work or even at the state level work, engage in a way that really fits the needs of each system stakeholder and partner entity, because it looks different in different places. Yep. We know rural jurisdictions look a lot differently than some of the urban jurisdictions. So we hope to be able to, again, empower and engage folks from different communities with some strategies of how to really implement, again, not just the large scale and macro level tools and instruments, but really to get down in depth into making the most at that local level and in certain communities. Yep. How to engage with those communities as well. How sometimes missed opportunities to engage with community stakeholders, when we look at things such as duplication of services, when we look at scarce resources, when we look at, some communities that don't have access to behavioral health services and or medical services, even for children that are court involved, how do we really galvanize the work that is taking place and or seek out non-traditional partners and partnerships to offset what is sometimes perceived as a lack of resources and the reality of there being a lack of resources. So again, just trying to bring some solutions to the table, but also, there's no cookie cutter work approach to this work. Just like the children that come before us need individualized ways to address that work, so do communities in working to address some of the challenges that exist in those communities. So again, empowering and bringing some large scale recommendations for those participants to consider, and hopefully just really, get the crowd excited about the opportunity to even talk about racial and ethnic disparities from a different perspective. A lot of times it's something that we shy away from, and we don't like the insinuation that if we're not addressing racial and ethnic disparities, then that makes us bad people or a bad system. And on the opposite side, if we do address it, then that makes us soft on crime, or it makes us, we're focusing on a racial lens that doesn't need to be included. But we're trying to just tweak that a little bit and really emphasize and highlight the opportunity that we have as juvenile justice officials to really look at it from a different perspective of ignoring some of these disparities, especially at different touch points, really actually jeopardizes community safety, and working with our partners to understand that as well. Because as you all know very well, this work cannot just be done by one part of our system. It can't be done just by the courts, just by probation, just by law enforcement, just by corrections. And it takes an entire holistic approach of working with schools differently, local community partners differently. And so really just hoping to inspire folks to be courageous in seeking some of these solutions and looking at it a little bit differently.
Yeah, so racial and ethnic disparities has been a hot topic in Nebraska over the past couple of years. I think we are starting to do a better job of addressing some of those issues, but there's definitely work to be done. And I'm excited for the fact that you're going to be offering action plans to go home with. I'm reading kind of the summary of what you're going to be doing, but allowing those people to take home those action steps to maximize what we're doing in regards to RED, I think is going to be enormous. Another thing, you talk about accessing services in remote areas. Maybe you've heard, but Nebraska has a lot of rural areas, and that's one of the things that I think we struggle with in the state of Nebraska is identifying those services that are out there for those remote areas who may have a county that is 300 miles wide, 200 miles wide, that has 2 probation districts in it because the population is so scarce. So I'm looking forward to that discussion, hearing what our attendees have to say about that. I'm sure they're going to pick your brain. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation.
And Adolphus, one thing that I also like that what you're going to try to persuade is that looking at how people can change the systems approach. I think people get comfortable in what they do when they feel like they don't have time to make those systems changes, in which I feel that we need to start somewhere. So if that means that's just one new document, one new practice within your agency or organization, I think it starts small, but can end up being big results. But I do feel that people get comfortable in their positions or how the way they do things over and over again, that making those changes can be time consuming, or it can be really hard on your morale as well. But I like the idea that you're going to really encourage people to think about things a little bit differently, look at how can we change our systems to be more sensitive of what's going on.
Absolutely. So again, Mr. Zavala asked me not to give away too many of the secrets, but one of the things that we'll be talking about is the pace of progress and the pace at which we make changes within the system, and how we have to be mindful of, different employees at different levels are all going to be at different stages of their career. They're going to be at different stages of learning. And we also, have to address folks that aren't interested even in the learning. How do we address that pace from those that are really engaged, from those that are disengaged? And how the leaders of some of those organizations, I believe you'll have 12 or 13 probation districts in Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe 12. I believe 12. Yep.
12, okay, so 12 different probation districts. So that pace may be different for each one, but we have to acknowledge and agree that the pace of progress is something that we want to give attention to in those jurisdictions that may require different approaches. And so again, that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in some of our work sessions, is about what that pace looks like. The pace of our partners. How much change is too much change for some of our partners based on some of their issues, how issues within other agencies that we work with, or entities that we work with, the challenges that they may face, how they need to be considered in our pace of what some of those procedural changes are. So Tammy, I like the way you just presented that, and even looking at some of the small wins that we need to achieve, because staff and employees at every level, they need to see that. So how does data even play into that? And how do we talk about data in the way that's not, this scary, we're doing, real deep regression analysis and so forth, that the general line staff would be like, we're doing what? Like, no, thank you. That's not why I took this job. But how can we just have a conversation about some very simple data, and using that data to make decisions about what changes are we ready for, and what changes that we've already put in place we can lift up and show the success and encourage employees through some of those challenges that are consistently identified in systems change, is being lifted up to say, hey, you've already done some of this. So again, just trying to present a little bit of that as well to help support and encourage that continued growth.
I've been in a lot of meetings where people sit around the table and talk about all the problems and the difficulties and the challenges. And one thing that I'm big on is, okay, so we've identified the problems and the challenges and the difficulties. Now, what are we going to do in regards to the solutions? Maybe we don't have an answer right now, but what movement can we do to start looking at the solutions?
Absolutely. And getting folks buy-in into, or like really laying out an expectation of, this is we work. This is not executive leader work or executive leadership. This is we work. So I'm requiring you to bring some recommendations to the table. Something as simple as, what's important to you. So if we have these recommendations, we've got some data that we're able to look at. We have some recommendations that we provided. What's important to you? And then collectively trying to build consensus around, where do we start, from a perspective that folks have that buy-in into understanding that little bit of extra push. Because a lot of this is looked at as extra work, like this is beyond my job description, or this is in addition to, or what have. But a lot of it isn't really. We're just not used to looking at it through the lens of, I need your participation and your buy-in at identifying what work that we need to do more efficiently, which actually means reducing, in some instances, the volume of work but really just changing that from a volume perspective to really looking at it in a more substantive and a very specific way about are we doing things effectively, or can we make some changes to make it more efficient and effective? Absolutely.
I think that's going to be great because, obviously our attendees are very diverse in regards to the positions they hold within the state of Nebraska. They're each individual district. We have line workers, we have frontline staff, we have administrators, behavioral health therapists. I mean, so getting everybody on the same page and figuring out how we can address these concerns, I think is going to be tremendous.
Yes.
Tammy, I can't go without saying that might be the first time anybody's ever called me Mr. Zavala. So that was kind of weird for me to hear, but I appreciate it, Adolphus. I really do.
Absolutely. Look, we're all professionals in this work, right? And even though I may have called Mrs. Sassaman Tammy a moment ago, that's just because of our conversations that we've had that comfort level. But we're professionals in this work, and this is a professional career track. And sometimes it's just us reminding each other in the work, not to make lightly of you presenting that, Mrs. Zavala, but in all seriousness, like sometimes it's there's not enough attention given to the professionalism in the juvenile justice arena. There are a lot of different reasons for that and ways that we can talk about, what the differences are within court systems as a whole, but, sometimes also offering that up to employees and staff. One of the things that I found very impactful in a couple of jurisdictions that I've worked with is simply identifying leaders and identifying managers and calling them all up to really be just that. Whether you're a leader and or a manager, you are a part of a leadership team based on the fact that you've assumed a certain role within the organization. And sometimes folks, just through the monotony and the mundane routine of the pressures of the system work that we have to endure, we just lose that a little bit. And sometimes we just got to remind folks, like, you're leaders within the system. And that means that we're going to require more from you and of you, as opposed to just being an advanced version of what you were before you were promoted. And that's always important. So, but thank you for the acknowledgement. Yeah. So it's a habit that I have.
That's great. No, that's great. So I got just a kind of an informal question here for you, Adolphus. Have you ever spoken in Nebraska before?
I have not spoken in Nebraska before, but I've had my eye on Nebraska for quite some time. Just looking at, again, that's one of many states that you've had some legislative changes over the year. Like other states, I think one of the things that is actually a common theme is that you kind of go through some relatively consistent challenges when you have legislative updates. So I'll just share, even in Georgia, we're still trying to maximize our procedures around some legislative updates that took place in 2014. How we handle our chins and status population, for example, is one of them. In that you had that statewide legislative mandates that were put in place, but you did not have specific procedures and or agreed approaches to how that was going to work. And we're still trying to figure that out here in Georgia. So I haven't spoken there in Nebraska, but again, Nebraska is one of the states that I've always looked at, not from a analytic perspective, but also just trying to get ideas from a lot of the great work that you all are doing there. That's also another thing that sometimes we devalue, is that we're looked at. It's kind of like we model our work on other jurisdictions and sometimes miss the value of what's also taking place. And you all are doing a lot of great things there in Nebraska that I hope to be able to complement and provide some support to the work that's already being done at a lot of levels.
Adolphus, so one of the things that I think we've been somewhat successful here in Nebraska is having legislators, or maybe a couple legislators, champion juvenile justice. That's been their focus. Patty Pansy Brooks comes to mind, and Senator Chris comes to mind, who's no longer in the legislature. Tony Vargas. So we've had a lot of, we've had a few that have really honed in on juvenile justice. It's been really helpful for us. They work with our local probation districts and other entities, nonprofits, service providers, things like that. Do you guys have that in Atlanta? Do you have those folks that are willing to champion juvenile justice initiatives?
Yes, we do. And I'll tell you, from the systems approach statewide, one of the challenges is maintaining the momentum of the work of that legislation beyond the individual legislators and those supporters and those champions beyond their tenure in the legislature. and identifying not just the key persons, but the scope of the initiatives that are supported legislatively so that the work can be maintained and it's not just a kind of a waiting out game. So we absolutely have great support all the way up to our Supreme Court, where we have advocates that really, have either a history of working in the juvenile justice system and or just an interest in the work, from Supreme Court again over to the legislative aspect of it. But champions for the work are key, because I believe that champions are often rooted in experiences that everyone else doesn't share. And part of them being a champion is adding the value of their voice to the general population to share something that really pulled at their heart, to really have an interest in that area. So absolutely, we do have a number of champions, but I think identifying those champions for change is also important, because this is difficult work sometimes. And when you're challenging status quo, when you're challenging the norm, and you're challenging, cheese being in one place, and it's the "who moved my cheese" phenomenon, you need those champions that are courageous enough to really say, hey, we're going to support you through this, so that anecdotal instances don't throw the work off. And they really push you and support you to rely on the data a little bit differently, so that, again, you don't have that automatic pushback based on high profile cases or cases that might receive a little bit more media attention. Those legislative champions really help you in that position as well as others.
Tammy, you got anything else for us? No? So I'll leave with this question. This is more of a personal question, Adolphus. I'm planning a trip to Savannah in the fall. What's the one thing I got to do?
Oh, man, I got some great folks that I need to put you in contact with down there in Chatham County, Georgia, which is where Savannah is. Of course, you've got to hit the cobblestone and get some of that seafood. And I'd say take one of the haunted tour rides as well. I'm not sure what your appetite is for history and scary themes, but I'll definitely say one of the haunted tour rides to take you through old downtown historic Savannah, as it's a great amount of history down there as well, that I think will be kind of a combination of fun and facts as well.
Perfect. I'll make sure we do that. So look, everybody, between the conversation with Joe Beckman, the conversation with Adolphus today, this is setting up to be an amazing conference. If you haven't registered, go register. You can go to njja.org, get registered. We'd love to have you there. It's been a phenomenal turnout for the past, 6-7 years. We'd love to have, break records in regard to attendance, because I think this year's information that we're going to get is going to be absolutely crucial to how we move forward as a state addressing juvenile justice issues. So, Adolphus, thank you so much. Looking forward to meeting you in person. Can't wait to get you to Nebraska. Can't wait to turn you into a Husker fan. And we're going to go from there, man.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. You'll hear this analogy again. So our conversation around racial and ethnic disparities, I'll compare it to an airplane ride as we talk about preparing to come out there. We're gonna get warmed up. We'll get in our seats. We'll put our seatbelts on. We're gonna take off. There may be turbulence. There may be some uncomfortable moments. But I hope to be the captain that will land you safely at a destination where we're a little bit more comfortable having a conversation around racial ethnic disparities and how, again, ignoring some of those touch points can lead to jeopardized community safety. So we're going to get you there safely.
Looking forward to it, Adolphus. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Adolphus. I appreciate your time, and we're looking forward to you meeting in person.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
All righty.
Thank you.
That's it. Perfect. Good job.